My sister crashed our wedding and claimed that our kids are illegitimate. I got married about a week ago. Unfortunately, it didn't go as smoothly as I had hoped. Let's start from the beginning. I have an older sister, let's call her Ashley. She's 26. Our relationship has always been competitive, to put it mildly. We despised each other as kids, constantly fighting over who was better. That rivalry never faded, even as we got older. Outwardly, we played nice in front of others, but inside, we were always ready to tear each other apart. Even our parents knew we couldn't stand each other, but they never tried to mend things between us. I think that, in some way, this lack of intervention made things worse. When Ashley turned 18, she left for college, and I felt relieved. Finally, I didn't have to tiptoe around her. She only came home for the holidays, bragging about her life, how she was studying at one of the top business schools in the state. I was jealous, of course, but my main goal was to surpass her, so I worked my ass off and got into an Ivy League university. That crushed her. For once, my achievements outshined hers. I thought this would end our rivalry. I was wrong. One day, she announced she was starting her own business with our dad's help, of course. Whether it was luck or effort, she actually made it work. A few years later, her company took off, and she moved to Japan to expand. She became insanely successful. Our parents were beyond proud. That was 2 years ago, and she's been in Japan ever since. Meanwhile, my life didn't go as planned. After graduating, I struggled. Seeing Ashley thrive only made my failure sting more. I got a job, but it was nowhere near what I had envisioned for myself. So I quit. Looking back, that was a huge mistake, but at the time, I thought I had to outdo my sister instead of focusing on my own damn career. It was stupid. I regret it. But I can't change the past. After quitting, I just waited. I genuinely believed some opportunity would fall into my lap. It didn't. Instead, I spiraled into depression. Ashley's success only made things worse, especially since my parents never shut up about how proud they were of her. I hated it, but I kept my mouth shut. Admitting I was bitter would only make me look worse. Then, I met Jackson. And honestly, that moment changed everything. At the time, it had been 6 months since I quit my job. I was still waiting for something to work out. But nothing did. I was broke, barely covering rent and necessities. My parents sent me money each month, but I still struggled. And every time they reminded me to pay them back when I could hear the disappointment in their voices. It fucking crushed me. Especially knowing Ashley didn't need their help at all. I was the failure, and everyone knew it. I started using dating apps, not because I wanted a relationship, but because I needed a distraction. Hooking up with guys I barely liked was easier than facing my reality. For weeks, I went on casual dates, nothing serious, nothing meaningful. Then, I met Jackson. He stood out immediately. He was funny, smart, and checked all the right boxes. He had been a straight-A student, went to culinary school, and now worked in a restaurant. He had his shit together. When we matched, we texted for nearly 2 weeks before he finally asked me out. That's when he dropped a bomb. He wasn't looking for something casual. He was dating to marry. I respected his honesty, so, despite not knowing where this would lead, I said yes. I agreed to my first date with Jackson out of pure curiosity. The date turned out to be incredible, like we had known each other for years. Honestly, it was probably the best date of my life. With him, I didn't feel the need to prove anything, which was a refreshing contrast to how I usually felt around other people. The conversation was effortless, and we just clicked. Something changed in me that night. I decided to give our relationship a real chance. We went on a few more dates, and 3 months in, I found out I was pregnant. The only thing I worried about was Jackson's reaction. That was my biggest fear. By then, he already knew everything about me, about my family, about my lifelong rivalry with my sister, about how I'd spent most of my life trying to outdo her. But being with Jackson made me want to be better for myself, not for anyone else. He knew me just as well as I knew him. More than that, he was the one who helped pull me out of my depression, encouraging me to stop waiting for life to happen and actually start looking for work. Thanks to him, I swallowed my pride and returned to my old job, the one I had stupidly quit. And honestly, it was one of the best decisions I had ever made. So when I found out I was pregnant, I wasn't scared for myself. I was just scared of how Jackson would take the news. Most guys would have panicked. Most guys would have left. And yeah, it had only been 3 months, and we were young, but deep down, I knew I wanted this baby. I couldn't explain why, I just did. To my surprise, Jackson didn't freak out. He told me it was my body, my choice, and that no matter what, he was going to be there for me. When I said I wanted to keep the baby, he smiled. Not just smiled, he was happy. He even admitted that, deep down, he had been hoping I'd want to keep it because he felt ready too. He just hadn't wanted to pressure me. But my choice made him the happiest man alive. We agreed that just because I was pregnant, we didn't have to rush into marriage. Instead, we decided to take our time, get to know each other even better, and figure things out together. And then, a few weeks later, we found out we were having twins. That was another shock, but a good one. Jackson moved in with me shortly after. Around that time, I met his parents. They were kind, welcoming people, the kind of parents who loved all their kids equally and never pitted them against each other. Their family was nothing like mine. For the first time, I saw what a healthy family looked like. That made me nervous about introducing Jackson to my own parents. I knew they wouldn't approve of my life choices. I had once been their brilliant, promising daughter, and now I was pregnant by a man I had barely known for a few months. I had even moved in with him. Most parents would be shocked, but mine? I was convinced they'd be furious, so I put it off for as long as I could. But when my belly started showing, I had no choice but to come clean. At 4 months pregnant, I finally invited my parents over and asked Jackson to be there for support. They knew I had been seeing someone, but they had no idea we were living together. And they certainly didn't know I was going to have his children. When I told them everything, I braced myself for the worst, for anger, disappointment, yelling. But instead, they were happy. They hugged me, congratulated me. And when I told them it was twins, my mom nearly fainted from excitement. It was the last reaction I had expected, but I was relieved. More than that, I was grateful. They even threw a party to announce that they were going to be grandparents. I also told them that Jackson and I weren't planning to rush into marriage, that we wanted to live together first before making that kind of decision. And they accepted it. They supported us completely. It shocked Mebute in the best possible way. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like everything was going to be okay. I even had a conversation with my parents about how much their support meant to me and admitted that I never expected it from them. That's when they told me they understood they hadn't been good parents to us growing up. They never stopped the rivalry between my sister and me because they thought they were doing us a favor by pushing us to achieve more. But over time, they realized how much damage that had done. They said it really hit them when they found out I had quit my job, not because I had a better opportunity, but because I was chasing an unrealistic need to outdo Ashley. They saw right through me, even though I had never admitted it to them. They just knew, and they felt responsible. They told me it didn't matter who was more successful. I didn't have to compete with Ashley to prove my worth. They loved me regardless of my accomplishments. They were equally proud of both of us. Not because of what we achieved, but because we had always tried our best. That conversation meant everything to me. It gave me a sense of peace, both during my pregnancy and after. I felt comfortable asking them for help with the babies while Jackson and I worked, and they never hesitated. They also told me they had tried having a similar conversation with Ashley, but it hadn't gone the way they had hoped. She had just laughed and dismissed them, saying she didn't need to hear their empty reassurances because, in her mind, I was nothing but a pathetic failure. That was the moment I had my breaking point. For years, Ashley had gone out of her way to make me feel small, but things escalated when I announced my pregnancy. She started making passive-aggressive comments in the family group chat, throwing in subtle insults disguised as fake compliments. Her goal was clear: she wanted to make me regret my decision, to humiliate me. In her eyes, I had ruined my life by getting pregnant before marriage and moving in with a man I had barely known for a few months. She saw this as a personal victory, as if my supposed failure made her success even greater. And because of that, she felt entitled to say whatever the hell she wanted. It started to wear me down. I considered leaving the family chat multiple times, but my parents convinced me to stay. They were trying to be better, and they wanted us all to stick together. So, for their sake, I stayed. They promised to put an end to Ashley's cruelty, or at least try, and if they failed, I could always walk away. When Ashley came home for Christmas, my parents confronted her. But by then, it was already too late. Her resentment toward me had festered into something beyond repair. She didn't just dislike me anymore, she actively wanted to see me suffer. That year, she was unbearable. Sure, she had always been insufferable with her constant bragging about her business. But this time, she took it to a whole new level. She came back from Japan knowing full well that I was pregnant, knowing that in comparison, my life wasn't nearly as impressive as hers. And she made sure I never forgot it. She took every opportunity to flaunt her success, throwing condescending glances my way, asking me if I was proud of her in the most smug, insincere tone imaginable. I felt humiliated, uncomfortable, and completely out of place. I left the family gathering early that night, fighting back tears the whole way home. After that, my parents tried to reason with her. They begged her to stop. But Ashley just laughed in their faces. She told them she had worked too damn hard for what she had, and she wasn't going to let me of all people make her feel guilty for being proud of it. She would brag as much as she wanted, and if I had a problem with it, that was my issue. That was it for me. I cut ties with her that day and left the family chat for good. My parents agreed it was for the best. We didn't speak for 2 years. I had no idea what she was up to, and honestly, I didn't care. Then, a few weeks ago, I got an unexpected update. Some relatives mentioned that Ashley had moved back from Japan with a baby. That was the first I had heard of it. Apparently, she had given birth just 2 months ago. My parents had video called her several times while she was still in Japan, but she had never let on that she was pregnant. When they asked her about it, she simply said she had wanted it to be a surprise. And then, just like that, she announced that she was now a mother and had recently married the father of her child. According to her, the wedding had taken place a year ago in a private ceremony, and now she was finally ready to share the news with everyone. The timing of her big announcement was suspicious, though, because my wedding had been scheduled around the same time. But thanks to her, the entire family was now talking about her marriage and her daughter instead of my wedding. She explained that her husband had stayed in Japan due to work obligations, while she had returned with the baby to introduce him to the family. I tried to ignore it, to focus on my own wedding, and not let her presence overshadow what was supposed to be my special day. Even after she came back, I kept my distance. But avoiding her wasn't enough. She still found a way to ruin my day. She crashed my wedding. She showed up uninvited, just after the ceremony. Honestly, I was grateful it happened after Jackson and I had exchanged vows, because if she had pulled this stunt earlier, I might have completely lost it. Seeing her among the guests, I nearly exploded. But Jackson and my parents helped me stay calm. It seemed like she had snuck in unnoticed, and if I made a scene, it would only make things worse. If I caused a commotion, my own wedding would turn into a dramatic event all about her. So we decided to let her stay as long as she didn't do anything too outrageous and deal with her later. The wedding was on Jackson's aunt's farm, and since we hadn't hired strict security, she had managed to slip in easily. Looking back, I wish I had spent extra money on security. It would have saved me a lot of trouble. For the entire time she was there, she went around telling everyone how happy she was, how her wonderful child had brought meaning to her life. And this was the worst part, though: my children were illegitimate, and that they didn't count because they were born before marriage. She said this, at my wedding, to anyone who would listen. Later, guests came up to me, telling me what she had been saying. I had to smile and act like I didn't care, just to keep the peace and avoid making a scene. It was exhausting. I was holding it together barely. And then just as I was about to snap, the police stormed in. I had no idea what was happening. Officers blocked the exits, locking everyone inside. Then, within seconds, they arrested Ashley. I was in shock. A woman, hysterical, crying, was standing there, holding a baby. The same baby Ashley had claimed was hers. And she was screaming that Ashley had stolen her child. The entire venue erupted into chaos. There were statements, handcuffs, everything. It wasn't until much later that we finally learned the full story. Ashley's baby didn't even exist. All the photos she had shown us? Fake. She had taken them from social media, photoshopping herself into them. Every time she had introduced us to the baby, she had actually been babysitting for a friend. After returning from Japan, she had been staying with this friend, since she had ended her lease and was looking for a new place. She had been watching the baby for free while living there. And then, on my wedding day, she took it too far. She kidnapped the baby. While her friend and her friend's husband were sleeping, she took the child and disappeared. When they woke up and found their baby missing, they panicked. She had stopped answering their calls. Desperate, her friend contacted the police. Fortunately, since Ashley had been obsessing over my wedding, her friends had a good guess where she might have gone. And that's how they found her and arrested her. It was insane. I still can't fully process it. My family can't either. It's one thing to be hyper-competitive, but to go to this level just to prove to our parents that she was still better than me, that's disturbing. Now, she's trying to get her friends to drop the charges because she knows she'll lose the case and end up in prison. She hasn't been sentenced yet, but for some reason, she blames me for everything. She claims that I only got married to spite her. Let's not forget I hadn't spoken to her in 2 years. I hadn't mentioned a single word to her since our last fight. More than that, I had been generous enough to let her stay at my wedding because I didn't want to cause a scene and embarrass her. And yet, she was the one who turned my wedding into a complete circus. If anything, I should be the one blaming her. Yesterday, she contacted me. She told me I needed to convince her friends to drop the charges. She wanted me to tell them that my marriage and my kids had pushed her into insanity, and that's why she had acted so recklessly. I told her I wished she would rot in prison, because that's where she belongs. Or, at the very least, a psychiatric facility because she's completely unhinged. Now, my parents are saying I should help her. They want me to lie to her friends, to tell them she wasn't in her right mind because of me, because I tormented her with my happy marriage and kids. As if I did something wrong. So, my parents believe I should convince her friends to drop the charges so that she avoids arrest. Since she had been living with them and babysitting their child, the situation is complicated. The police can't move forward without the parents' cooperation. If she hadn't been staying with them and watching their child, this would be a clear-cut kidnapping case. But because of the circumstances, things are murky. And for now, Ashley has managed to avoid being taken into custody. She insists that the parents had given her permission to take the child whenever she wanted, but there's no proof of that, and until the case is resolved, she remains free. All I'd have to do is convince her friends to withdraw their complaint, but I don't want to do that. I don't think she deserves my help, and yet, my parents believe that if I refuse, I would be in the wrong. So, the question is, am I a bad person for wanting my sister to go to prison? Update 1. I've decided to cut ties with my family. Yes, my parents supported me during my pregnancy and after I gave birth, and I'm grateful for that. But at this point, I need distance. Whether they support me now or not doesn't matter anymore. I just want to focus on my husband and my children. I can't do that if I keep getting dragged into their drama. I want out. Completely. This whole situation has taken a toll on my mental health, and I refuse to let it consume me any longer. I appreciate what my parents did for me when I needed them, but I am done with anything related to Ashley. I think it's obvious why I don't want to help her. She doesn't deserve it. She dug this grave herself. She can climb out of it alone. Jackson agrees with my decision. That's all that matters. Update 2. I just got word from some relatives. Ashley is in serious trouble. Her friends have officially decided to pursue the case, and they're not backing down. Until now, Ashley had been insisting that she had their permission to take the baby whenever she wanted, but after what she pulled at my wedding after she claimed the child was hers, there's no way she's getting out of this easily. Honestly, I don't see how she can talk her way out of this one. It's a sad situation, sure, but am I surprised? Not at all. I still haven't spoken to my parents, and I won't until they admit that I was right, until they apologize for pressuring me to help Ashley. I know I'm asking for a lot, but I just can't talk to them until they realize how much damage they caused by raising us the way they did. They need to understand that, in some way, they are partially responsible for how Ashley turned out. Update 3. Hey, so Ashley's trial is happening. We don't know how it's going to end yet, but if she's convicted, she could be facing up to 5 years in prison. However, given her unstable mental state, the sentence might be reduced. Either way, it's not my problem anymore. Jackson and I are finally going on our honeymoon, something we desperately need after the disaster that was our wedding. Since I'm still not speaking to my parents, I can't ask them to watch the kids. So, we're relying on Jackson's parents instead. I just hope our honeymoon turns out better than our wedding. Thank you for your attention. Subscribe, leave a like, and have a great day.